Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
It's Saturday, the 30th of November. I'm Ciara Evans, and this was a week that saw Labour's first ministerial resignation, a ceasefire announced between Israel and Lebanon, escalating threats from Vladimir Putin, and tributes to a much-loved UK author.
Grab a cup of something hot, put up your feet, and get up to speed on the 7 biggest stories of the week. This is the Standout 7 from the Smart 7.
It's news,
but not the news.
It's been a busy week in UK politics, which ended with the first ministerial resignation of the new Labour government. Friday morning saw Transport Secretary Louise Haigh step down after details emerged of a fraud conviction from 2013, which she says revolved around a work phone which she incorrectly reported as stolen. She quit with a letter to Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who thanked her for all she had done for the party's transport agenda. The week also saw the government introduce a new Get Britain working package and battle with Elon Musk over an online petition. Musk has managed to wangle his way into Donald Trump's cabinet as the joint head of the new Department of Government Efficiency, but it seems his political ambition doesn't stop there. He was busy targeting the UK, referring to us as a tyrannical police state at the weekend and pushing his followers to vote on an online petition for an immediate general election, even though it's less than 5 months since the last one. He's urging has seen over 2 million people from around the world sign the petition, but Prime Minister Keir Starmer didn't seem too impressed when he popped up on the This Morning sofa.
I remind myself that very many people didn't vote Labour at the last election.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised that many of them want a rerun. That isn't how our system works. There will be plenty of people who didn't want us in the first place. What I focus on is the decisions that I have to make.
He was standing by his government's decision to do the difficult things first, and Home Secretary Yvette Cooper was in equally belligerent mood in the Commons when she came under pressure on small boat crossings from Shadow Home Secretary Chris Phillip.
Why do you think the numbers have gone up so much on her watch?
He was the immigration minister who, I might remind him, told the Commons and the Select Committee that he wouldn't rule out using giant wave machines as the way to stop small boat crossings.
This week also saw the annual Confederation of British Industry conference take place in London. Chair of the CBI, Robert Soames, started things off with a warning to the government not to treat businesses as a cash cow in reference to tax changes in the budget. He warned that the cash cow has already been milked and that the Chancellor shouldn't go and whack it. It sounded briefly as though he should have been at last week's farmers' protest. Chancellor Rachel Reeves says the choices around the budget were difficult, but that she had no real choice about what she did.
I've heard a lot of feedback. What I haven't heard are many alternatives. And we had to put the public finances on a firm footing to bring stability back to the economy. That's what I promised, that I would never play fast and loose with the public finances.
New Tory leader Kemi Badenoch was also in the bill and criticised Labour's budget, but wouldn't commit to reversing the national insurance charges. She spoke about her time as business secretary and how she tried to be a champion for business at the cabinet table.
I know that it is not government that creates growth. It is business. Government often needs to get out of the way. But this is a very difficult argument to make. People want the government to fix everything. The government introduced the new Get Britain Working White Paper on Tuesday. It's intended to tackle a high rate of what is known as economic inactivity, particularly among 16 to 24-year-olds in the wake of the pandemic. Over 9 million of them are either not employed or looking for work, and there are a raft of changes coming aimed at adding an extra 2 million people to the workforce. Work and Pensions Secretary Liz Kendall says that the blame in part lies with the Tories' failure to deliver levelling up.
The reason we have ended up here is the failure of members opposite to create good jobs and to properly reform welfare. But under our government, this will change. Because under this Labour government, if you can work, you must work.
Schemes will include guaranteed apprenticeships or workplace training, along with more investment and a rebrand for the humble job centre. Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary Helen Watley says that the schemes don't add up to much.
This appears to be little more than a pot of money for local councils, some disparaging language about the work of job centres, and a consultation which will be launched in the spring.
New figures were due to be released from the Office of National Statistics on Thursday, which were set to show the levels of net migration to the UK over the last year. The amending numbers did see new Tory leader Kemi Badenoch call a press conference on Wednesday evening to announce her new policy on migration. She was promising a review of every element of the current legal framework, including another threat to leave the European Court of Human Rights, and she criticised previous Tory leadership for failing to keep their promises on immigration.
Under my leadership, we are learning from our mistakes, and it is time for a new approach. We need to change. If immigration is too quick, there is no integration. The ties that bind us start to fray.
Much anticipated migration numbers were finally released on Thursday by the ONS. They released numbers which covered July 2023 to June 2024, but they also revised upwards the numbers from the previous year. That means that the net migration number up to June 2023 rose to over 900,000 under a new Tory government. That means that the net migration number up to June 2023 rose to over 900,000 under a Tory government who promised to take back control of Britain's borders. Prime Minister Keir Starmer was quick to point out that the numbers have fallen since. He also announced a new deal with Baghdad to tackle people smugglers in Iraq and a white paper which will review the visa system.
What people want from politics is not unreasonable. They want order and security, borders that we control, an economy that offers secure work and good opportunities for everyone. Where the last government failed you, this one will not.
Last week saw the International Criminal Court issue arrest warrants for Israeli PM Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defence Minister Yoav Gallant for alleged war crimes, claiming there's reasonable grounds to believe the pair are responsible for starvation in Gaza. On Saturday, Netanyahu hit back in a video statement calling the decision anti-Semitic. But EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell dismissed the accusation and reminded member states that the warrants are binding.
You cannot say that every time that someone disagrees with the policy of one Israeli government is being accused of anti-Semitism. I have the right to criticize the political decisions of the Israeli government.
Reactions have been split while several EU countries have pledged to enforce the arrest. Hungarian PM Viktor Orban invited Netanyahu to visit, and US Senator Lindsey Graham warned of sanctions against allies who act on the warrants. But Labour MP Diane Abbott says the UK government would comply with the warrants.
Netanyahu is a war criminal. If it wasn't for him, this war wouldn't have been prolonged as long as it had been. So, yeah, I think he should be arrested. It's no question.
This week also saw good news as after 14 months, Israel and Lebanon agreed to a potential 60-day ceasefire, which was announced after a meeting of Israel's Security Cabinet. Israeli PM Netanyahu was reserving the right to change his mind based on any aggressive behaviour from Hezbollah, however.
The duration of the ceasefire depends on what happens in Lebanon. We are maintaining our full liberty to take military operations. If Hezbollah tries to attack us, if it arms itself, if they dig tunnels, we will attack.
Before the vote went through, there was a final wave of bombings by the Israeli Air Force targeting Hezbollah sites in central Beirut and killing at least 20 people. There's no sign, however, of any breakthrough in Gaza, where conditions continue to worsen. US President Biden made an address from the Rose Garden, thanking French President Emmanuel Macron for his diplomatic efforts and hailing a breakthrough while promising to keep pushing for a ceasefire in Gaza.
For nearly 14 months, a deadly conflict raged across the border that separates Israel and Lebanon. Let's be clear. Israel did not launch this war. The Lebanese people did not seek that war either.
Thousands of people began returning to their homes in South Lebanon on Wednesday as the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah took effect. The Israelis had asked people not to return as yet, as their forces remain in place, while the Lebanese army was urging civilians to stay away from frontline towns and villages as they began to deploy in a peacekeeping role. UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy said the ceasefire is a good step forward.
I'm delighted that a ceasefire has now happened, and that was indicated in the G7 meeting I had in Rome on Monday. So very pleased.
With no sign of any progress in Gaza, Israel has been keen to emphasise that any ceasefire is dependent on a cessation of hostilities from Hezbollah and that they've no intention of accepting any infringements. David Mencer is an Israeli government spokesperson, and he said Israel will be rigorous in its enforcement of the ceasefire.
We will respond forcefully to any violation. With the US's full understanding, Israel maintains full freedom of military action. So if Hezbollah violates the agreement, we will defend ourselves.
Russia continued to hit Ukraine with wave after wave of aerial attacks across this week, targeting power networks. Last weekend, President Zelensky estimated that in just 1 week, Russia had fired more than 800 KAB guided bombs, 460 attack drones and 20 missiles at Ukraine. He warned the country risks becoming a testing ground for new Russian weapons, calling it an international crime. At the same time, Ukraine is feared to have lost 40% of the land it's gained in its surprise incursion into Russia's Kursk region in August. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot was in the UK last weekend to meet with his British counterpart David Lammy. While there, he reaffirmed France's commitment to Ukraine.
We will support Ukraine as intensely and as long as necessary. Why? Because it is our security that is at stake. Each time the Russian army progresses by 1 square kilometer, the threat gets 1 square kilometer closer to Europe.
There was news too of a British man, James Anderson, who was fighting for Ukraine's Foreign Legion in the Kursk region, who has been captured by Russia. Foreign Secretary David Lammy has vowed to do all he can to assist in Anderson's release. Lammy was also busy on Monday announcing a new sanctions package against Russia, this time targeting what's known as Russia's shadow fleet. He was speaking in Italy at a meeting of the G7's foreign ministers, who pledged continued support for Ukraine for as long as it takes.
It's hugely important at this G7 that all colleagues across the G7 continue to stand with Ukraine for as long as it lasts, and we are confident that Ukraine can have the funds and the military equipment and kit to get through 2025.
Angela Rayner, Rachel Reeves and Yvette Cooper may have to reconsider future travel plans as they were barred from visiting Russia on Tuesday. They were part of a list of 30 UK politicians added to a stop list in the wake of escalating tensions between the UK and Russia after Keir Starmer's approval of Storm Shadow missiles to strike Russian targets. Russia has warned it's planning further retaliation, although it has also continued its drone attacks on Ukrainian power plants. Testifying in front of the Commons Defence Select Committee, the Deputy Chief of the Defence Staff, Lieutenant General Rob McGowan, says if it comes to it, the British Army is ready for whatever action is required.
If the British Army was asked to fight tonight, yes, it would fight tonight. And I don't think anybody in this room should be under any illusion that if the Russians invaded Eastern Europe tonight, then we would meet them in that fight. That would be the first point I'd make.
Donald Trump made another appointment to his White House team on Wednesday, appointing retired Army General Keith Kellogg as his special envoy for Ukraine and Russia. Trump has promised repeatedly to end Russia's war on Ukraine, and tapping Kellogg, who was a former security advisor for Mike Pence, was cautiously welcomed by diplomats. It appears Trump's plans is to force both sides to the negotiating table, but it's not clear on what conditions. Meanwhile, at the UN, the current US Deputy Ambassador Robert Wood criticised Russia's escalation against Ukraine, including last week's use of an experimental ballistic missile.
Despite all the suffering and substantial risk to global peace and security, at the cost of tens of thousands of Ukrainian and Russian lives, and against the protests of the international community and the council of this council, Putin has escalated and expanded his war of choice.
Russian President Vladimir Putin was in Kazakhstan on Thursday, where he held a press conference and spoke out about the latest waves of attacks on Ukraine. The last week has seen wave after wave of aerial attacks on Ukraine's power plants and the use of an experimental ballistic missile. Putin threatened he would use the new arsening missiles, which he claims can't be shot down by air defences, to directly attack Kyiv. The Ukrainian side described the threat as fiction. Putin also had compliments for incoming President Trump, praising him as intelligent at the same time as he criticised the Biden administration for supplying long-range weapons to President Zelensky.
These strikes took place in response to the incessant strikes on Russian territory by American missiles. ATACMS, as has been said many times, there will always be a response from our side.
Donald Trump got his final victories of the 2024 presidential election campaign on Monday. As Special Prosecutor Jack Smith filed for dismissal in the cases against Trump for election interference and the classified documents case in Florida. The 6-page motion on the January 6th case outlined legal advice that made it impossible to proceed with federal charges against the sitting president. And the cases can't be parked until the end of Trump's second presidency either, handing Donald a victory after a years-long strategy of delaying and appealing the cases against him. CBS's Scott MacFarlane said that in the end, the special prosecutor really didn't have a choice.
Because he is going to be the president-elect, the policy is clear. You can't bring criminal cases against a sitting president. He's not making an argument that he believes his case has been weakened, that his case has any flaws, or that there's a problem with evidence. It's just that he can't try a sitting president.
Still to come in the Standout 7, Australia bans teens from social media and tributes to a best-selling author.
Right after this.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes per detail.
Welcome back.
At 3 a.m. last Sunday, 33 hours behind schedule, the COP29 conference in Azerbaijan finally wrapped up. It was a rocky event, to say the least, marked by the host country's president calling oil and gas gifts from God and climate leaders declaring the summit unfit for purpose halfway through. It all ended with a pledge from richer nations to increase climate funding to a record $300 billion per year. But developing countries remain sceptical, worried by the amount and the fact that much of the funding will come as grants and loans rather than direct aid. Still, UK Energy Secretary Ed Miliband insisted the funding is substantial.
These are always very hard negotiations, but I think by anyone's standards this is a very significant financial package. This is just an overall total. You've got new countries that haven't contributed before, like China, that are going to be counted for the first time, and that's important.
This summit did mark the first time that China has agreed to contribute to international climate funds. However, the details remain unclear, including how much of the funding will be loans, and the total is nowhere near the $1.3 trillion that developing nations were looking for. Energy Security and Net Zero Secretary Ed Miliband was under pressure from Tory shadow Climate Change Secretary Claire Coutinho, who says the UK is doing too much compared to its size.
He would make us a warning, not an example to others.
Oh dear, oh dear. It's so interesting that she now opposes this, because the 2035 NDC is exactly the target her government legislated for in 2021.
Australia took a dramatic step on Thursday in an attempt to protect children from the perils of social media. They passed a law called the Social Media Minimum Age Bill that requires tech giants to prevent teens from getting access to their sites. If they fail to do so, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok and X could be liable for fines of up to 50 million Australian dollars. Tech experts, including the Smart 7's own tech guru Will Guyatt, have been warning that there's no practical way to enforce the ban. And the Australian Human Rights Commission also has concerns about vulnerable teens and human rights. You can hear more on the story in this Sunday's episode of The Sunday 7. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says it's an important point of principle.
I want young Australians to grow up happy, active and safe, off their phones and onto the footy and cricket field, or indeed just engaging with each other on a face-to-face basis.
The death was announced on Monday of best-selling author Barbara Taylor Bradford. She was 91 years of age. She wrote 40 novels over the course of her career, and her most successful was also her first, A Woman of Substance. It went on to sell 30 million copies and was made into a TV series, which is still the most watched in Channel 4's history. Taylor Bradford was different from the blockbuster writers of her era, creating epic novels with strong female characters who had a habit of smashing glass ceilings. She was made an OBE by Queen Elizabeth for services to literature in 2007 and was a passionate advocate for women and women's rights, as she explained to ITV in 2018. Rest in peace, Barbara.
Our brains are not different. I know very dumb men and I know brilliant men. I know dumb women and brilliant women. And I think that women are underestimated not by every man, but we're still undervalued.
You've been listening to The Smart 7. We'll be back tomorrow at 7 a.m. Hit that follow button and have a great day. Give us 7 minutes, we'll give you the world.